I am 48 years old, a woman who has spent the better part of her life raising a son she adored. My son, Mark, who is 26, was my entire world, especially after his father and I went our separate ways. We were a team. I thought that bond was unbreakable. Then came Chloe. She was 25, and from the moment she entered Mark's life, I felt a shift. A small, almost imperceptible cooling. It was in the way he would stop telling me things, the way plans we made would suddenly change to accommodate her schedule. I tried to be understanding. This is what happens when your children grow up. They build their own lives. I wanted to be the kind of mother who welcomed her son's partner with open arms, and I truly tried. I invited Chloe for dinners, asked about her work, remembered her birthday. I made every effort to build a bridge. But it felt like I was the only one on the construction crew. When they announced they were expecting a baby, my heart soared. A grandchild. A new chapter for our family. All the small hurts and feelings of being pushed aside seemed to melt away in the face of such wonderful news. I was going to be a grandmother. I immediately offered to help. I could host a baby shower, I told them. I had a beautiful backyard perfect for it. Chloe smiled a tight, polite smile. "That's so sweet of you to offer," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "But my mother, Karen, has always dreamed of doing this for me. She has it all under control." I felt a familiar sting of disappointment, but pushed it down. This wasn't about me. It was about Chloe and the baby. "Of course," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "Just let me know what I can contribute. I'd love to help with the cost, or at least get a list of things you need." Mark looked at me, a flicker of his old self in his eyes. "Thanks, Mom. That would be great," but Chloe cut in again, her hand resting on Mark's arm. "We wouldn't dream of it. This is our responsibility. Karen and I have a vision for it, and it's all taken care of." The message was clear. My involvement was not required. My money was not wanted. I was an outsider, an audience member, not part of the production. Over the next few weeks, I heard snippets about the shower. It was going to be at a fancy boutique hotel downtown. There was a theme, a caterer, a specific color palette of muted earth tones that Chloe described as organic and sophisticated. Every time I asked Mark for details, he was vague. "Chloe and her mom are handling it," he would say, his voice strained. "You know how they are. They have a plan for everything." I didn't know. Their plan seemed to be to erase my presence from the narrative of my own grandchild's arrival. I was sent an invitation, a thick cardstock affair with elegant calligraphy, just like any other guest. It felt cold and formal. There was no personal note, no phone call from my son saying he couldn't wait for me to be there. Just a date, a time, and a link to their expensive gift registry. The day of the shower arrived, a bright, sunny Saturday. I spent longer than usual getting ready. I chose a nice dress, a soft blue that brought out my eyes. I did my hair and makeup carefully. I told myself it was a celebration, and I would not let their coldness ruin it for me. I was going to smile, be gracious, and celebrate the coming of my grandchild. I wrapped my gift, a beautiful handmade quilt I had spent weeks stitching, along with a generous check that I knew they needed, whether they would admit it or not. I held my head high as I walked into the hotel. The room was stunning. It was exactly as Chloe had described, sophisticated, elegant, and completely impersonal. Balloons in shades of beige and sage green floated near the ceiling. A long table was laden with artisanal cheeses and delicate pastries. Soft, instrumental music played in the background. It looked less like a baby shower and more like a corporate networking event. I saw Chloe and her mother, Karen, standing near the entrance, greeting guests. They were a match set in expensive linen dresses, their smiles looking practiced and brittle. I approached them, my own smile feeling just as forced. "Chloe, Karen. Everything looks beautiful." Karen gave me a brief, dismissive glance, her eyes sweeping over my dress before turning back to another guest. "Thank you for coming," she said, her tone implying my attendance was a minor inconvenience she was tolerating. Chloe was a little better, though her warmth didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said. Mark was nowhere to be seen. I'll just find my seat, I said, trying to escape the awkwardness. Karen's smile tightened. Oh, let me show you. We have a seating chart. We've put you somewhere special. Her words sounded friendly, but there was a strange glint in her eye. Something felt wrong. I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. She led me away from the main cluster of round tables, which were decorated with flowers and placed cards for all of Chloe's friends and family. She led me toward the back of the room, to a corner that was strangely empty. And then I saw it. A single, solitary chair. It was positioned directly behind a thick, concrete support pillar. I stopped walking. I stared at the chair, then at the pillar. It was at least 2 feet wide. From that chair, my view of the entire room would be completely blocked. I wouldn't be able to see the gift table. I wouldn't be able to see the main table where Mark and Chloe would be sitting. I wouldn't be able to see anything or anyone. It was not a seat. It was a punishment. It was a deliberate, calculated act of humiliation. They had taken the time to plan this. To find the most insulting place in the entire room and assign it to the baby's grandmother. Here you are, Karen said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We wanted to give you a quiet spot where you wouldn't be disturbed. My mind went blank with shock. I couldn't form words. I just looked at her, then at the chair, then back at her. This was not just being excluded. This was being erased. They had literally put me behind a wall. My heart pounded in my chest, a painful, heavy rhythm of hurt and anger. I felt my face flush with shame. Every other guest was seated at beautifully arranged tables, laughing and chatting. And I was being sent to the corner hidden from view like something to be ashamed of. I could feel the eyes of other guests on me as they noticed where Karen had led me. I saw pity in some, confusion in others. The humiliation was public. It was the point. I stood there for a long moment, my purse clutched in my hand. Karen was waiting, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She wanted to see me sit down. She wanted to see me accept my place. I took a deep breath, the air feeling thick and heavy. I could feel tears pricking at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I turned to her, my voice surprisingly steady. Thank you, Karen, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It's a very thoughtful placement. She just nodded, her smile widening ever so slightly, and then she turned and walked away, her mission accomplished. I sat down in the chair. The cold reality of it was even worse than I had imagined. The pillar was immense. It smelled of concrete and old paint. The happy sounds of the party were muffled, distant. I was completely and utterly alone, isolated from the celebration of my own grandchild. It felt like a physical blow. All the little slights, the ignored calls, the canceled plans, they had all been leading to this moment. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a statement. They were telling me, in the clearest way possible, that I did not matter, that I was not family, that I was nothing. The anger began to burn through the shock. It was a hot, sharp flame, and it felt better than the cold emptiness of the hurt. I sat there, hidden behind my pillar, and I made a decision. They thought they could make me disappear. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I did not stay behind that pillar for long. Maybe 5 minutes. Just long enough for the initial wave of shock to pass and for the cold, hard anger to settle in my bones. I looked at the gray, unforgiving concrete in front of me. This was what they thought of me. An obstacle. Something to be hidden. I stood up. My legs felt a little shaky, but my resolve was solid. I was not going to spend this day, or any other day, being treated like this. I was done being polite. I was done pushing down my hurt to make them comfortable. My comfort mattered, too. My dignity mattered. I smoothed down my dress and walked out from behind the pillar. Several people looked up as I emerged, their expressions a mixture of surprise and curiosity. I ignored them. I let my eyes scan the room, looking for a new place to sit. My gaze landed on the gift table. It was at the very front of the room, right next to the plush armchair where Chloe would sit to open her presents. The table was draped in a white linen cloth and was overflowing with brightly wrapped packages and pastel-colored gift bags. It was the center of attention. It was the most visible spot in the entire venue. A slow smile spread across my face. It was perfect. They wanted to hide me in the back. Fine. I would put myself in the front, right in the spotlight. I walked calmly and deliberately across the room. I could feel Karen's eyes on me. I could feel Chloe's. I didn't look at them. I kept my focus on my destination. There was an empty chair at a nearby table that hadn't been fully occupied. I picked it up, carried it over to the gift table, and set it down at the head of the table, as if it were a throne. Then I sat down. I placed my purse on the table next to a large, stuffed giraffe, and crossed my legs. I looked out at the room, meeting the eyes of anyone who dared to look my way. The whispers started almost immediately. I could see heads turning, people leaning in to talk to their neighbors. The happy, light atmosphere of the party had shifted. It was now thick with tension. My son, Mark, finally appeared from a side room. He saw me and his face went pale. He started to walk towards me, a look of panic in his eyes. But before he could reach me, Chloe intercepted him, grabbing his arm and whispering furiously in his ear. He stopped, looking torn and helpless. He glanced at me, then at her, then back at me. He gave a weak, apologetic shrug and let her lead him away. That single gesture hurt more than the pillar. He saw what they were doing. He knew it was wrong. And he did nothing. He chose her right there in front of everyone. I sat there, a silent, unmoving protest. I felt a strange sense of calm. I had taken back a piece of my power. I might have been uninvited from the family circle, but I was going to be a spectator on my own terms. As I sat there, my eyes drifted over the pile of gifts. Boxes wrapped in paper with cartoon ducks, bags filled with tissue paper, and then something else. Something that didn't fit. It was a plain, standard-sized manila envelope. It had no ribbon, no bow, no cheerful card attached. It just had my son's name, Mark Jennings, typed on a plain white label. It looked official, clinical. It was tucked between a diaper cake and a box that probably held a baby monitor. My curiosity was immediately piqued. It was so out of place among the festive presents. I looked closer at the return address. It was from a law office, but beneath the firm's name, in smaller letters, were the words, "Discreet Investigative Services." My blood ran cold. An investigator? Why on earth would a private investigator be sending my son a letter? And why would it be delivered here, to his baby shower? It made no sense. It was an anomaly, a puzzle piece from a completely different box. 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind. Was Mark in some kind of trouble? Was he being sued? Was this about a debt? He had been so stressed lately. I had chalked it up to the baby and the pressure from Chloe and her family, but maybe it was something more. Something he was hiding. He had asked me for a loan a few months ago, a significant amount of money. He'd been vague about what it was for, just saying it was to get things settled before the baby came. I had given it to him without question. He was my son. But now, looking at this envelope, a sick feeling began to grow in my stomach. What had he been settling? I had to know what was inside. It felt like more than just a letter. It felt like an answer. An answer to why my son had become a stranger to me. An answer to why his fiancée and her mother treated me with such contempt. It was a secret, sitting there in plain sight on a table full of happy, celebratory things. And I had a feeling it was not a happy secret. The desire to open it was overwhelming. It felt like a key to understanding the mess my life had become. But I couldn't just grab it and tear it open. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. The stage was already set. Now I just had to wait for the right moment in the play. I settled back into my chair at the head of the gift table, my eyes fixed on that plain brown envelope. The party was just getting started. My sister, Sarah, who had arrived a few minutes after me, found me sitting there. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Me, enthroned at the gift table, and the rest of the party, giving us a wide berth. She was 45, 3 years younger than me, and she had always been my rock. She marched right over, her expression a mix of concern and amusement. "Okay," she said, pulling up another stray chair to sit beside me. "What is going on? I got your text about the pillar, but this is a whole other level of rebellion." I gave her a weak smile. "They sat me behind a concrete pillar, Sarah." "A pillar?" Like I was a piece of furniture they didn't want anyone to see. Her face hardened. "They did not. Karen did that? On purpose." With a smile on her face, I confirmed, the bitterness returning. She called it my special, quiet spot, so I decided to find my own special spot. One with a better view. Sarah surveyed the room. "Well, you certainly got that. You're the main attraction now." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Chloe and her mother look like they're about to spontaneously combust. I've never seen two people try to smile so hard while looking so furious." It gave me a small, petty thrill to hear that. "Good," I said. Then, my eyes flickered back to the manila envelope. I pointed it out to her. "Look at this." Sarah picked it up, her brow furrowed. "Mark Jennings. From a law office? Investigative services? What is this?" "I have no idea," I whispered back. "It was just sitting here with all the other gifts. It doesn't belong. It feels wrong." We both stared at the envelope, a silent question hanging in the air between us. "What do you think it is?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But Mark has been acting so strange for months. He's stressed, he's distant, and he's completely under Chloe's thumb." And I glanced over at Chloe, who is now glaring at us openly. She seems desperate. There's something frantic about her. We both knew something was off. The way they had rushed the engagement, the way they seemed to be performing for everyone. It didn't feel real. "You think this is about money?" Sarah suggested. "Maybe he got into some kind of debt." "Maybe," I conceded. "He borrowed a lot of money from me a while back. He said it was to prepare for the baby. But this feels different. Why would a private investigator be involved in a simple debt?" The pieces weren't fitting together. A PI meant surveillance. It meant secrets. It meant someone was looking for information that someone else was trying to hide. Just then, my ex-husband, David, Mark's father, made his way over to our little outpost. David's primary mode of existence was conflict avoidance. He would rather swallow poison than have a difficult conversation. He looked flustered, his face slick with sweat under the hotel lights. "What are you doing?" he hissed, keeping his voice low but urgent. "You're causing a scene. Karen is having a fit." "Hello, David," I said, my voice cool. "Nice of you to come say hello to the mother of your son." "This isn't the time for jokes," he said, wringing his hands. "People are staring. Just go back to your seat. Please. For Mark's sake." I raised an eyebrow. "My seat? You mean the one behind the structural support column? The one they put me at so no one would have to look at me? Is that the seat you think I should go back to?" David had the grace to look ashamed for a split second. "I know it's not ideal, but you moving here makes everything worse. You're embarrassing Mark." The accusation stung, but I held my ground.
"No, David.
Karen and Chloe embarrass me. And Mark stood there and let them. He is embarrassing himself by allowing his fiancée to treat his own mother this way. I am just refusing to be humiliated quietly." "You're being dramatic," he muttered, falling back on his favorite dismissal. "Am I?" I challenged. "Or are you just so terrified of a little conflict that you'd rather see me hidden behind a pillar than stand up for me for once in your life?" He flinched. He had no answer for that. He just shook his head, looking defeated. "Just try not to ruin the whole day," he pleaded, before scurrying back to the safety of the crowd. His cowardice was another drop of fuel on the fire of my anger. He was enabling them. He was co-signing their appalling behavior just to keep the peace. But their peace was coming at my expense, and I was no longer willing to pay the price. Sarah squeezed my arm. "Don't listen to him.
He's weak."
"You're doing the right thing." "I know," I said, my gaze returning to the envelope. "But I think there's more to this than just a bad seating arrangement. Something is very wrong here, Sarah. And I think the answer is right here, in this envelope. My initial investigation was complete. My suspicions were confirmed by the reactions of everyone involved: Chloe's fury, Mark's fear, and David's spinelessness. They were all dancing around a secret I was now sitting right next to. My resolve hardened into something sharp and dangerous. I was going to find out what it was. The party continued around me, but the energy had shifted. The light, happy chatter was replaced by hushed conversations and sideways glances in my direction. I was a storm cloud in their perfectly curated sky, and they didn't know what to do about it. Chloe started the baby shower games, her voice a little too loud, her smile stretched a little too thin. She was trying to wrestle back control of the event, to pretend that the old woman sitting defiantly at the gift table didn't exist. It wasn't working. My presence was a constant, silent disruption. After a painful round of guess the baby food, where no one seemed to have much of an appetite, Karen could take it no longer. She marched over to me, her face a mask of controlled rage. Chloe followed a few steps behind, looking like a nervous shadow. Karen stopped in front of me, planting her hands on her hips. "I think we need to have a word," she said, her voice low and menacing. "I'm listening," I replied calmly, not bothering to stand up. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice barely a whisper but vibrating with fury. "You are making a spectacle of yourself and ruining Chloe's special day." I met her gaze without flinching. "Actually, I think you tried to ruin my day first. When you assigned me a seat with a view of a concrete wall, I simply corrected your error in judgment." "There was a seating arrangement for a reason," she hissed. "It was carefully planned." "Oh, I have no doubt it was planned," I said, letting a small, cold smile touch my lips. "You plan to hide me, to make me feel insignificant. I'm just not cooperating with your plan. I decided I'd rather be significant." Her face flushed a deep, ugly red. She was a woman used to getting her way, and my refusal to be cowed was infuriating her. "You are selfish," she spat. "This day is about Chloe and the baby, not you." "The baby is my grandchild," I reminded her, my voice turning to ice. "That makes it about me, too. Whether you like it or not, I am the grandmother. And I will not be hidden behind a pillar." From behind her mother, Chloe finally spoke up. Her voice was trembling, a mixture of anger and something else.
Fear.
"You are ruining everything," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. They looked like crocodile tears to me. This was supposed to be a perfect day. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you treated me like garbage," I shot back. "Perfect days don't usually start by deliberately humiliating the groom's mother." "You should be grateful you were even invited," Chloe said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The mask of politeness was gone, revealing the ugly contempt underneath. The words hit me like a slap. Grateful. I was supposed to be grateful for an invitation to an event celebrating my own family, an event where I was treated like an outcast. The last bit of my composure cracked. My anger was now a white-hot flame. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I am not grateful. I am done. I am done with your disrespect. I am done with your mother's snobbery, and I am done watching my son disappear into this toxic little world you've built." I saw a flash of pure panic in her eyes. She glanced at the manila envelope on the table beside me, and her face went ashen. She knew. She knew what was in it, and she was terrified that I did too. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just about social climbing or petty jealousy. This was about something much bigger. The envelope wasn't a bill. It wasn't a lawsuit about money. It was leverage. It was a secret so damaging that she and her mother had to control every aspect of this new life, including pushing me out entirely to protect it. Chloe took a step forward. "You need to move," she said, her voice now a desperate plea. "Please, just go sit somewhere else. Anywhere else." "No," I said, the word coming out as solid as a block of granite. "I do not. I think I like it right here. I have the best seat in the house." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. She looked at her mother for help, but Karen seemed just as stunned into silence. They had played their hand, and they had lost. They had tried to bully me, and I hadn't backed down. Now they were scared. The power had shifted. It was no longer in their perfectly manicured hands. It was sitting on the table right next to me, inside a plain brown envelope. I settled back in my chair, the strange calm returning. I didn't know all the details yet, but I knew the core of it. I knew I had them. And I knew that before this day was over, everyone else would know it too. The rest of the games passed in a blur of tension. No one was having fun anymore. The air was thick with unspoken questions. The guests were no longer participants in a party. They were an audience at a drama, waiting for the next act. And they all knew it was coming. The main event was the opening of the gifts. Chloe and Mark took their places, Chloe in the big, comfortable armchair, and Mark perched nervously on the armrest beside her. All eyes in the room turned towards the gift table, which meant all eyes were on me. I had become the master of ceremonies against my will, or perhaps entirely by my will. I let them open a few presents. A diaper bag, a set of organic cotton onesies, a ridiculously expensive baby stroller that I knew for a fact they couldn't afford. With each gift, Chloe would exclaim with feigned delight, holding it up for everyone to see. "Oh, it's perfect. Thank you so much." Her voice was brittle, her smile painted on. She kept shooting nervous glances at me, at the envelope. Mark said nothing. He just sat there, a statue of misery, his face pale and clammy. He looked like a man on his way to his own execution. I decided the wait was over. The time had come. As a cousin handed Chloe another brightly wrapped box, I stood up. The scraping of my chair on the polished floor was loud in the suddenly quiet room. Every head turned to me. I reached down and picked up the plain manila envelope. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with the truth. I held it up so everyone could see it. "Before we open any more of these lovely gifts," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and steady, "I think there's one that Mark should open first. It seems to be very important." I made direct eye contact with my son. His eyes were wide with terror. He was pleading with me, begging me with a look to stop, to put it down, to let the lie continue. But I had been letting the lie continue for months, and all it had gotten me was a seat behind a pillar. I looked over at Chloe. Her face was a storm of fury and fear. She was mouthing the word "don't" at me, over and over again. Her perfect day was crumbling, and she knew it. Then I looked at Karen. Her smugness was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. She knew what this was. They all knew. They had just been praying I didn't. I started walking towards them. Each step felt deliberate, powerful. I was no longer the victim in their story. I was the narrator now, and I was about to write the final chapter. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the hotel's air conditioning. The guests were frozen, their faces a sea of confusion and anticipation. They knew they were about to witness something they would talk about for years. I stopped directly in front of my son. I held the envelope out to him. "Mark," I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. "This came for you." He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He wouldn't take it. His hands stayed clenched at his sides. He just shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Chloe, however, sprang into action. She jumped up from her chair and stepped between me and Mark, her body a physical barrier. "Give that to me," she demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. "It's private mail. You have no right." "I'm sure it is private," I said, not taking my eyes off hers. "But this is a party, isn't it? A celebration of new beginnings. And since my assigned seat was behind a pillar, I thought I'd bring the party over here for a better view. So what is it, Chloe? Is it the final bill for all of this?" I gestured around the extravagant room. "Or is it something a little more interesting?" Her face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what you're doing," she seethed. "Oh, I think I do," I replied. And with that, I decided I was done waiting for them to act. I turned the envelope over in my hands. The flap wasn't sealed. It was just tucked in. They had probably opened it, seen the contents, and in their panic, stuck it on the gift table, hoping it would get lost in the shuffle. A foolish, desperate move. I pulled the flap open. My fingers didn't even tremble. I reached inside and pulled out a thick sheaf of papers. I unfolded them. The letterhead was from the investigative agency, but it was the large, bold words at the top of the first page that caught my eye. I didn't even have to search for them. They were designed to be seen. I read them aloud, my voice echoing in the dead silent room. Paternity test results. A collective gasp went through the crowd. It was a soft, shocked sound, like the wind being knocked out of 50 people at once. I saw my sister Sarah's face in the crowd. Her jaw dropped in disbelief. I saw my ex-husband David, looking like he was about to faint. Karen had her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Chloe looked like she had turned to stone. And Mark. My son looked completely and utterly broken. He had known this was a possibility. He had clearly suspected it enough to order a test. This envelope wasn't a surprise. It was the confirmation of his worst fear. I let the words hang in the air for a long, torturous moment. Then I lowered my eyes to the page. I scanned the technical jargon, the genetic markers, the columns of numbers. I didn't need to understand it all. The conclusion was written in plain, simple language at the bottom of the page, impossible to misinterpret. I lifted my head. I looked straight at my son, past the frozen form of his fiancée. I looked into the eyes of the boy I had raised, the boy I still loved, despite everything. My voice was surprisingly gentle when I spoke. It wasn't triumphant. It was just factual. It was the sound of a terrible truth being set free. "Mark," I said, my voice shaking just a little, but clear as a bell. "According to this report, the probability of you being the biological father is 0%. The silence that followed was deafening. It lasted for a full 5 seconds. And then chaos erupted. Karen was the first to break. She let out a strangled shriek and turned on her daughter. "What have you done?" she screamed, her voice shrill and ugly. "You foolish, foolish girl. What have you done?" Chloe burst into racking sobs, her hands flying to her face as she collapsed back into the armchair. The guests were all talking at once, a roar of shocked whispers and exclamations. People were standing up, grabbing their purses, their faces a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Mark didn't move.
He didn't speak.
He just stood there, staring into the middle distance, his face completely blank. The truth had hit him, and he had simply shut down. David finally unfroze and rushed over to me, his face purple with rage. "What have you done?" he yelled, grabbing my arm. I pulled my arm away from his grasp, my own anger surging back, hot and righteous. "What have I done?" I repeated, my voice rising to be heard over the din. "I have done what my son was too afraid to do. I have exposed a liar. I have revealed the truth." I looked around the imploding party, at the wreckage of Chloe's perfect day. This whole shower, this engagement, this baby. It's all been built on a lie. I didn't create the lie, David. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it. He stared at me, speechless, for once in his life. The enabler had no words when the truth was laid bare. There was nothing left to smooth over. The lie was broken, and so was everything else. The party disintegrated in a matter of minutes. Guests fled as if escaping a burning building, murmuring apologies and avoiding eye contact with any of the key players in the drama. They wanted no part of the fallout. Chloe was still sobbing hysterically in her chair, while her mother, Karen, alternated between screaming at her and trying to get her to be quiet. It was a truly pathetic sight. The two women who had been so smug and powerful just an hour before were now reduced to a screeching, weeping mess in a room full of wilting flowers and untouched petits fours. Mark had finally been led away by one of his cousins, still looking like a zombie, his eyes vacant and unseeing. He hadn't said a single word to me. My sister Sarah was by my side instantly. She wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. "Oh my God," She whispered into my hair. I cannot believe that just happened. Are you okay? I let out a long, shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I felt strangely calm, almost hollowed out. I think so, I said, pulling back to look at her. I'm better than okay, actually. I feel free. It was true. The weight of all the hurt, the exclusion, the disrespect, it was gone. It had been replaced by the clean, sharp certainty of the truth. And so is he, I added, glancing in the direction Mark had disappeared. He doesn't see it yet, but he's free too. She had him trapped. She had you both trapped, Sarah corrected me gently. That woman is a viper. And her mother is even worse. We watched as Karen tried to physically pull a wailing Chloe out of the armchair. Well, Sarah said with a grim satisfaction, looks like their perfect world just came crashing down. As we were getting ready to leave, gathering my purse and the quilt I had brought as a gift, David cornered me one last time near the exit. His face was blotchy, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. You humiliated him, you know, he said, his voice thick with accusation. You did that to your own son in front of everyone he knows. I was tired of his cowardice. I was tired of him blaming me for the consequences of other people's actions. No, David, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. Let's be clear about what happened here today. Chloe and her mother tried to humiliate me. They stuck me in a corner because they were terrified I would uncover their disgusting secret. Chloe lied to our son for months, trapping him into a life he didn't choose with a child that isn't his. I didn't humiliate Mark. I liberated him. I just chose to do it in public because, frankly, that's where they chose to disrespect me. He opened his mouth to argue, but for once, he had no response. The logic was undeniable. He couldn't defend them. He couldn't blame me. He just stood there, looking lost and old. I walked past him without another word. There was nothing more to say. The days that followed were quiet. The explosion at the shower had sent shockwaves through our extended family and social circles. My phone buzzed with texts from cousins and old friends, all of them expressing a mixture of shock and support. The story had taken on a life of its own, and by all accounts, Chloe and Karen were social pariahs. They had been exposed not just as liars, but as cruel, manipulative people. The public humiliation they had designed for me had boomeranged back onto them 100 times over. It was almost a week before I heard from Mark. He showed up at my door one evening unannounced. He looked terrible. He was pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and he had lost weight. He looked like the boy he was, not the man he had been pretending to be. I let him in without a word, and he collapsed onto my sofa, burying his face in his hands. He sat like that for a long time, just breathing. I made him a cup of tea, the way I used to when he was a teenager with a broken heart, and sat in the chair across from him, waiting. Finally, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. She admitted it, he said, his voice hoarse. All of it. He told me everything. He confessed that he'd had doubts for months. The timeline of the pregnancy never quite added up. Chloe had been evasive and controlling whenever he tried to talk about it. She had manipulated him masterfully, using his desire to be a good man and a good father against him. She had accused him of not trusting her, of trying to ruin their happiness. He was so worn down by her emotional blackmail that he started to believe he was the crazy one. I ordered the test a month ago, he admitted, his voice full of shame. I had to know. I used a private service, so she wouldn't find out. The results were supposed to be mailed to my office. I don't know how they ended up at the shower. She must have been intercepting my mail. He shook his head, looking disgusted. She knew. She must have seen the results before the party and put the envelope on the gift table, hoping I wouldn't see it until it was too late, until after we were married. I'm so sorry, Mark, I said softly. I'm sorry you went through that alone. He finally met my eyes, and I saw tears welling up. I'm the one who's sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I let her get in my head. I let her push you away. I knew what she was doing was wrong. When I saw you sitting at that table, and when her mom put you behind that pillar, I knew it was cruel. And I didn't do anything. I was a coward. The tears finally fell, and he started to cry, deep, heartbroken sobs. I moved to the sofa and put my arm around him, holding my son while he wept. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's over now." We talked for hours that night. It felt like a dam had broken, and all the things that had been left unsaid for the past year came pouring out. He told me how miserable he had been, how much pressure he was under. He apologized for the pillar, for the coldness, for everything. He broke up with Chloe the day after the shower. The wedding was off. He was devastated by the betrayal, but underneath the pain, I could see a glimmer of something else: relief. He was free from a future that would have destroyed him. Our relationship wasn't magically fixed overnight, but the foundation was there. We were talking again. We were a team again. We started the slow, careful process of rebuilding what Chloe had tried so hard to tear down. The mountain of baby gifts from the shower ended up in my garage. Mark couldn't stand to look at them. One day, I boxed them all up and donated them to a local women's shelter. As I dropped off the last box, I thought about that day. I hadn't gone to the party seeking revenge. I had gone seeking a place in my son's life. I had gone with hope. But when they tried to make me small, when they tried to shove me into a dark corner and render me invisible, I found a strength I didn't know I had. I learned that my dignity was not something I should ever have to negotiate. They wanted to hide me, to silence me. But instead, I brought their deepest, darkest secret into the brightest light imaginable. And in doing so, I had saved my son. They finally learned what it feels like to be exposed. They finally learned what it feels like to have nowhere left to hide.